My name is Max Krieger, and I was born in a small town of Grabowiec. That's near Warsaw, Poland. And I would like to tell about my life in Poland and the time I went through the concentration camp. I was born 1932 in Poland, Grabowiec. I have my dad and my mother, older sister, and a younger brother is Irma, and my brother's name is Helmut. My sister is 6 years older than I am, and my brother is 3 years younger than I am. Before the First World War, there was very little employment in Germany, and so people moved out of Germany, different countries, and my parents or grandparents, they moved to Poland, and they got some land and started farming. Our town in Poland had 34 small farmers, and about half of them were Germans. So there were a lot of German people living in Poland. And so that's how I ended up being born in Poland. And during the war, since Hitler occupied Poland, I belonged to the Hitler Youth. Anytime a boy turned 10 years old, he automatically had to belong to the Hitler Youth. And Hitler Youth is kind of like the Boy Scouts, but it's a lot rougher training because they train you for war. They teach you how to use weapons, and they teach you how to shoot and everything else. So right from 10 years on, they were training us for war. Twice a week we had training, but my parents being Christians, they would not let me go on Sundays for the training. And a lot of people, they had to pay fines when they don't let their children go to their meetings. But since my father was the head of the town, he got away with it. In the summertime, they would send us to camps. And these camps in the Hitler Youth were very rough training. And there were a lot of boys that just couldn't take it, and they had to send them home. And anytime a boy turned 15, he was drafted in the service, and he was put out to fight. So I was very fortunate that I was not old enough to be drafted in the service. And my father was too old, and everything was fine until Germany lost the war. I was German, living in Poland, and a lot of Germans were able to escape. We had traveled for 2 weeks with horses and wagons, and then the Russians captured us, and this was at night. There were a lot of people shot, and my father was killed by the Russians when we were first captured. And because we were Germans, they put us in a concentration camp. My brother was always with me. We were in the same concentration camp, but my sister and us, we were separated. I was 12 years old when the Russians captured us. They took my sister separate from us, so we never knew what happened to my sister until a year and a half later. She was in hiding on a Polish farm, but my brother and I, we were in Auschwitz and other camps, my mother, my brother and I. The concentration camps are big fenced-in areas, and they have like small garages, and on each side there are wooden shelves, and that's where the people sleep, on those shelves. And these buildings are just out of boards. There's no heating, no toilets. They just have outhouses, and that's the way people slept. But two of the concentration camps we were at, there were so many people that they didn't even put us in these buildings. We just had to sleep outside, and we had to huddle together to keep warm. My mother was taken prisoner to Russia, and after being in Russia for over 6 months, many of them died and got sick, and those that were still fairly good, they sent them to Germany. After the first camp, when they let us out, we didn't know where to go or what to do. We went to houses to beg for some food, or if we could work or do something to get some food, because we never had good food in the camps. And some Polish people might give us a little loaf of bread or slices of bread, but most of them didn't want to have anything to do with us. But there was one house we went to, was a little distance off the main road. She was a single lady, had 2 children, and she took us in. And because it was icy and a lot of snow, she was sympathetic to us, and we slept in the barn because she just had a small house. But she made us some soup, and we were able to eat at her place, and we cleaned their barn for her and just did anything we could to show how much we appreciated her. And so then when we left there, and there were several times that I think my life was saved because people didn't know that I was German because I could speak Polish so fluently. But I know of some German people that were beaten because they were Germans. And there was a couple of times that there were Polish boys that surrounded me and they were gonna beat me up. They had clubs and knives, but fortunate enough, I was always rescued by some Polish man. We made our way back to our hometown, and we had to work for Polish farmers. And my brother and I, we were split up. He was in one town and I was in another town. He was only 9 years old, I was 12, and we were fairly well treated. A lot of kids had it a lot worse than we did. It was interesting. I worked for this Polish farmer, and he went to pick up the mail for the city, for the town, and he was looking through the mail at the post office. It was just a small post office, and he ran across a letter from Krieger to a completely other Polish family. And so he wondered, is that a letter from Max's mother? So he brought it home, and he asked me, what's your mother's name? And I said, Krieger. And he says, do you have any idea where she is? I says, no, I haven't seen her for over a year. We never knew what happened to her. And so he says, let's open this letter, and then after we find out who it is from, we'll seal it back up, and I'll take it back to the post office, he said. And he says, you have to promise not to tell anyone. So he opened up the letter. Here it was from my mother. She was looking for us. And so he sealed up the letter and took it back to the post office, and I copied the address, and I wrote back to Germany, and we were able to correspond together. I was able to write to her and tell her we're alive, and my brother's not far away, and so I would tell her always what's happening to us. We never knew what happened to my sister until a year and a half later. She wrote to a man that was a good friend of my father's. And someone told me in Poland that my sister had written to Poland. And so I got some time off from the farmer, and it was quite a distance away, and I ran all the way because I was afraid of other Polish people capturing me or beating me up. And I went over, and the people remembered me, and they gave me a cookie and a glass of milk, and they gave me the address of my sister. I'll never forget that. And so then right away I sent that address to my mother, and that's how we found each other, through mail. And then after 3 years they said that they would release us. They would send us to East Germany on a children's transport. And then they gathered us together at this town called Chechanov, and they put us in a camp for 2 weeks until they got enough people together to make boxcar loads of people. And they would put us in these boxcars and send us from one camp to another. And it took them 2 months to send us from Chechanov to East Germany. And in each camp we maybe a week or two, and so many people along the way died in these concentration camps or in boxcars, especially older people and small children. They never made it. Once we got to East Germany, there were East German soldiers and Russians, because Russia occupied East Germany. And so in East Germany, that camp, they were a little better to us because they gave us some shots, and they were trying to clean us up, and they sprayed all kinds of powders on us. But still, we never were able to take our clothes off to be clean. And from there, they told us that we could go across to West Germany. But once we got to the border, they just wouldn't let us across. And that's where this man came over, and I feel it was an angel sent from God that really wanted to help us. And he kind of prepared us for the crossing of the border. He gave us strict instructions that we were not allowed to walk and with our feet high up. We were supposed to shovel our feet so we wouldn't step on any mines. If there would be mines, we would just kick them. And it was really dark. We could see the bridge up ahead where they wouldn't let us across, and so there was a searchlight from the bridge going always across. And whenever the searchlight came our way, we had to lay down. And then when the searchlight was gone, then we could run. And it was quite dangerous crossing. And at one time we saw the Jeep coming, Border Patrol Jeep, so we had to just lay behind bushes, wait till he passed. And then we got to the river. The river wasn't too deep, it was only about waist deep. So we were able to go across it. And after we got across, we still weren't sure that we were in East or West Germany. And so we made our way to this building, which was a small restaurant. And there were people sitting on chairs, sleeping. We could see them through the window. And so I went inside and asked the man closest to the door, I asked him, "Is this East or West Germany?" And he says, he looked at me, he could see that we were wet, or I was wet because I was inside. And he says, "Oh, you just crossed the border, huh?" I says, "Yeah." Well, he says, "Come on inside and sit down on the floor because there are no chairs left to sit on." And he said that to wait there till the morning, and then we could go to Hamburg, to the main city. So that was quite a relief, being free from the Russians. We went by train to Hamburg, and in Hamburg we didn't have any money or any food, so we went to a mission. And at this mission, we talked to a man that was there at the desk and told him our story, that we had come out of Poland and we've been in concentration camp in East Germany, and we had escaped, and we still needed to go to where my mother was, which was another 2 days trip by train, and that we had been separated for over 3 years, and that our father was killed and our sister was still in Poland. And so he listened to our story and he asked us more questions, and he disappeared for a while, and then he came back and he brought us a small loaf of bread and a train ticket for both of us. Went to a small city or a small town called Bachband, and that's where my mother was living. Well, once we got to Bachband, we didn't know the town, and so at the train station I asked the man if he knew where Berta Krieger, my mother, was living. And he looked at us and he could see that we were very dirty and uncombed and unkept, very unkept. And so he says, "You must be Berta's sons." And he says that your mother comes here to the train station every time the train arrives, and the train arrives there twice a day, morning and afternoon. And this was in the afternoon. But see, he says today she's not here. So he told us which way to go, where she lives. But really, she was on her way to the train station, but they were a little bit late. And so while we were walking along, here comes the wagon. A wagon with 2 ladies on top of the wagon. And when they spotted us, the wagon stopped. And one of the ladies just jumped off and come running to us. And she didn't ask who we were or whether we were clean. She still recognized us, and she just hugged us both and just embraced us and was happy to see us again after 3 years. She didn't go back to work that day, but she took us to her little place. She had one room that was hers at this farmhouse, but she didn't take us inside. There was a little they called it in German Backhaus. That's where they did their baking and cooking the potatoes for the pigs and preparation for the animals. She took us in there and made us take all our clothes off, and she put our clothes in a big pot and boiled them to get rid of all the lice and fleas that we had. Cut our hair, and then she took us in this little room that she had. This was a small room. She had a single bed and a small stove. That's where she lived. And since we came and were with her, there was not enough room for all of us to sleep, but she put 2 chairs at the end of the bed, on the side of the bed, and we slept crossways just to be together. Well, my mother, being a Christian, she was attending a Baptist church. And when I got there, she took us right away to the church. And everybody was very glad to see us because they had prayed for us. And so that first few months I went to school. And then I worked for a German farmer that attended that church. And his main reason for hiring me was he had lost part of his feet during the war. He was in the service and he couldn't walk very well. And so I did most of the farming for him. But another purpose for him hiring me was he wanted me to become a Christian. And he made sure that I went to church every Sunday and he would pray for me to become a Christian. But my sister was not able to come to West Germany until later. So that's where we were reunited, in West Germany. Well, my mother had a sister that after the First World War, she and her husband went to Mexico. And in 1945, they decided to come to Los Angeles because Mexico was not so well to be living in. So when my mother had come out of Russia, she wrote to Mexico to her sister. She kind of remembered her address because my mother had lost everything too. But that letter from Mexico was forwarded to Los Angeles. And so my mother's sister wrote to Germany, and that's how my mother and her sister found each other. And so from Los Angeles, they used to send us packages of clothes and even some food. And they knew that we didn't have anything in Germany. And I remember getting shirts from Los Angeles, flannel shirts, colored shirts. And in Germany, you just wear plain clothes. You don't wear anything colored. And we boys, we thought, oh, how are we going to be so different from the other German boys? But we were just very happy that people cared about us and sent us things. And then my mother's sister and my uncle, they said to help us get a new start in life. They said they would sponsor us to come to the United States. And so they sponsored us. We went in Germany, tried to get our paperwork going so we could come to the United States, but when they found out that I had belonged to the Hitler Youth, they wouldn't let me come. My mother and my brother came in May of 1950. They came on the Queen Mary. And since I was still underage, my mother rode back to Germany, to the German consulate. And 2 years later, on my birthday, November 1st, I left Germany to come to the United States. And I was aboard ship for 14 days from Bremerhaven to New York. But aboard ship, I couldn't speak any English, but I met quite a few English people, and one of them especially, he couldn't speak German, but we could play chess together. And we had a lot of fun playing chess together. But I also met some people, English people, that could speak German. I also met a German fella that was coming to Texas, and he could speak a little bit English. And so we became very good friends during the 2 weeks. And when we arrived in New York, his uncle was waiting for him. And so his uncle took me along too. And we went to his home, And the next day he took us to the train station. And so from New York, I traveled with my friend as far as Texas by Greyhound bus. And then he stayed there, and I had to come on my own to Los Angeles. And I couldn't speak a word in English, so whenever the bus stopped and going to a restaurant, I was not able to read English, so whenever I would see the person next to me, whatever he ordered, I would point to it, and I would usually get something to eat. And then I got to Los Angeles at the Greyhound station. I was looking for my brother or my mother, but there was nobody there. So I'm walking along with my one little suitcase that I had, and this man walked past me, and he took a second look at me, but he kept going. And I thought, well, I have two addresses, one to San Marino where my mother lived, and the other one to my aunt. She lived in Los Angeles. And so I thought, well, if I don't find anybody, I'm gonna hire a taxi and have him take me to one of these places. But pretty soon this man comes back, and he looks at me, and he says, "Are you Max Krieger?" I says, "Yes." He says, "I'm your Uncle John." And so I was very happy to see him. And so he took me right away to church. That's where, this was on a Sunday, and that's where my mother and my brother were. I arrived in Los Angeles November 18th, so it was just before Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving was at my aunt and uncle's in Los Angeles. And the whole family got together, because here I had come from Germany. And so there was a table, a long table set with all kinds of good food, a big turkey, all kinds of vegetables. And they said, "Max, you can eat all the meat you want." And it was something that I'd never heard before. Even in Germany, after the concentration camp, you always got a little piece of meat with your meal. That's all you were allowed to eat. And so coming here and just getting this abundance of food was something I had never heard before. And it made a big impression that there is so much affluence of things in the United States. And then my cousins came over, and other friends, and they took me to the park, to Elysian Park, and to see how people are free, not having to be afraid to be out in the park and play together. That was a big impression on my life. I'm just very happy to be in the United States, being free.